We continue now at the top of Daf 100b in Mesechet Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 100b. The Mishnah here continues. We're discussing a case of a situation of an individual who doesn't know who his father is because his mother got married. Within 3 months, she married a second husband after her first husband. So we don't know whether this child belongs to the first husband or whether this child belongs to her second husband. And the Mishnah over here continues. Hayulo achem min harishon v'achem min hasheni. Let's say he has paternal brothers from the first husband, and there are also paternal brothers from the second husband, but they're not maternal brothers. They all have a different mother. So in this situation, these individuals either are his paternal brother, and therefore there is going to be Yibam and Chalitza, or they're not related to him at all. And if they're not related to him at all, so then it's no issue, and he can actually marry their wives. If, let's say, those individuals die, he can marry the widows, no problem at all. Again, like it says, Shalom me'o so'em. Again, these paternal brothers are not from the same mother, so they're definitely not his maternal brothers, and it's a suffix whether or not each one is a paternal brother or not, because again, we don't know who his father is. So the halach is who choletz umiyabim. He's allowed to do chalitza or yibum. In other words, let's say one of these brothers would die, so he can do yibum even with the widow, because if it really was his brother, then it's a real yibum. And if it's not really his brother, so then it's like a total stranger, and it's no problem for him to marry this woman, and he can do chalitza as well if he wants. Vehem. Now, when it comes to them, echad choletz ve'echad miyavim. So one of them should do chalitza and one of them should do yibum. In other words, if this individual, the suffix individual, were to die, so then when it comes to his wife, so we don't know whether his wife does yibum to the brothers from husband number 1, or is she doing yibum to the brothers from husband number 2. So what we should say is that the brother, let's say, from husband number 1 can do chalitza, and then the brother from husband number 2 can do yibum, or it can be vice versa. The one from number 2 can do the chalitza, and the one from number 1 can then do yibum. And the Mishnah continues, Haya echad Yisrael ve'echad Kohen. Let's say, again, this individual doesn't know who his father is. Now, let's say one of the potential fathers is a Yisrael, and let's say one of them is a Kohen. So then, no se isha reuya l'Kohen. He has to marry a woman that's fit for a Kohen. He's not allowed to marry a woman that a Kohen cannot marry because he might be a Kohen. Vein matame lemesim, he's also not allowed to become tamei meis because he might be a kohen. Vim nitzma, but if he does become tamei meis, eno sofeg es arbaim, he does not get the 40 lashes because again he might not be a kohen. Eno ochel betruma, he's not allowed to eat truma because he might not be a kohen. V'yimachal, but if he does eat truma, eno meshalem karen v'chomesh, he doesn't need to pay the karen and the chomesh. Normally, if a Yisrael eats truma b'shogeg, he has to pay back a karen, he has to pay back the principal and a fifth. But in this case, he might be a kohen, so he doesn't need to make that payment. Ve'eno cholek ala gorin, we don't distribute him truma at the granary. Umocher ha-truma v'adamim shelo. Now he is allowed to sell the truma, and the money, he can keep the money, because again, let's say it's his own truma that he's separating, he might be a kohen, so he can keep it. He's allowed to sell that truma and keep the money for himself. V'yeno cholek b'kachei hakachim, he's not allowed to take portions from the kachei kachim, again, because he might not be a kohen. Ve'en nosnin lo es hakachim, we don't give him kachim. Ve'en motzian es shalom miyadu, but we don't take away that which is his from him, because he might be a kohen, so if he already has it, he's allowed to keep it. Upatum and hazroa v'halochayim v'akeva, normally, let's say you have a Yisrael who has an animal, so he has to give gifts to the kohen from the animal, the zroa, the l'chayim, and the keva. In this case, he doesn't have to give the zroa, l'chayim, and keva, because he might be a kohen. Let's say he has a bechor, he should let it graze until it develops a mum, and then he'll be allowed to eat from the meat from that animal. All of these situations over here were all described in the Mishnah earlier as well. Anytime you have a situation of a person who is a suffix, whether he's a Kohen or whether he's a Yisrael, these are the halachas that apply to this individual. The Mishnah says in general, we place upon this individual the stringencies of Kohanim and the stringencies of the Yisraelim, because again, we don't know whether he's a Kohen or a Yisrael. Hayu shneim kohanim. Now let's say you have a situation where both of the fathers are kohanim. So now we know for sure he's a kohen. We just don't know who his father is. So who onein aleim v'heim onein alav. So the Mishnah says, first of all, let's say they die, so he becomes an onein for them, because again it might have been his father who dies. And onein again is like a kind of an avelus before the body is buried. You're called an onein, and also they're onein for him. Let's say he dies, so they each become onenim. They each become an onein, because again that might be their son. Now he's not allowed to become tamei for them because it might not actually be his father. They're not allowed to become tamei for him because again he might not be their son. Now he does not inherit them because the other heirs can say the one who died is not really your father. But they, however, they could inherit him. Let's say he has no one else to inherit, so now they each have an equal claim and they can split the inheritance. He's also pater. Let's say he hits or curses this one one or that one. Usually if you hit your father or you curse your father, so then you're chayiv. But in this case, the individual is going to be patur because, again, we don't know for sure that it's actually his father. Ola b'mishmarus shel zeh v'shel zeh. Now again, Kohanim have shifts that they work in the Beis HaMikdash. This individual doesn't know who his father is, which Kohen is his father, so he has to go up to the Beis HaMikdash for a shift on both the shift of the first one and the second one, because each one might be his father. Ve'eno cholek, however, he doesn't take a portion, that the Mishmar would usually take a portion from the Beis HaMikdash, from the Karbanos. He doesn't get those portions that the other Kohanim get, because again, it might not really be his Mishmar. Im hayu shneim b'mishmar echad. Now, if it happens to be that both of the fathers, both of the individuals who might be his father, they both work the same shift in the Beis HaMikdash, so no tel chelek echad, then he will be allowed to take one portion mimanav shach, because he is certainly at the right shift, because one of these individuals is actually his father. And Rashi over here says, hu onen aleim, he's considered an onen when they die. This is l'chumra, this is all for stringency. Shem zeh aviv, in other words, let's say one of them dies, it might be his father. Uviyom misaso aser zeh lechol b'kachim. The halach is that on the day of the death, the person's an onen and he can't eat kachim. Shema aninas chalalav, and over here also, maybe he's an onen, he can't have kachim. V'chein hein onenim olav, the same the other way around, they're onenim for him. Uviyom moso asurim shneim b'kachim. So when he dies, both of them are not allowed to eat kachim. Uparach b'gemar. Now the Gemara is going to ask, hechi dami d'shneim chaim. How could it be in the Mishnah over here that both of the fathers are actually alive? Because the assumption here seems to be that both fathers are alive. Let's say the first father divorced the mother, and then the mother within 3 months married her second husband. But him tomar begrusha. But if you're going to say it's a situation of a divorcee, and then as a divorcee she married the second Kohen, so amai hu ein mitame l'rishon im benohu. But so then why can't he become tameh for the first father? Let's say it is his son, harei tov. If that's actually his father, then it's fine. V'yameino beno. Now, if it's not really his son, let's say he's not the son of the first father, so harei cholol v'chulu. Wouldn't he become a cholol because the second Kohen married a grusha? Because again, the mother was a divorcee and she married the second one, so then he's a cholol, and it's no problem for him to become tamei. Mefarsh b'Gemara, all of that is going to be explained in the Gemara. And the Gemara says, Dafka michlatz v'hadar yevume. Let's say in a situation where he has potential paternal brothers from one father and potential paternal brothers from the other father, but they are not maternal brothers. So in that case, if he were to die, so in terms of his widow, so the brother, let's say, of one of the fathers, from one of the fathers will do chalitza, and then the brother from the other one is actually allowed to do the yibam, because it's not a problem. If it's an actual case of yibam, if that's the real brother-in-law, the yibam is fine. And if it's not the brother-in-law, so it's just like two people getting married, and it's not going to be a problem. But the Gemara points out it has to be that the chalitza is done first and then the yibum. Aval yibume berei shelo, but you can't do the yibum first. Again, like we've said earlier, the kapaga b'yevam l'shuk, because otherwise you might end up with yevam l'shuk over here if you do the yibum immediately without chalitza. So really, maybe this man that she's marrying, maybe it's not really the yavam, it's not really the brother-in-law. She's just marrying somebody that is unrelated, and she hasn't yet done chalitza from the brother-in-law. That would be a problem of yevam l'shuk. And the Gemara continues, Amar Shmuel, Shmuel says, Asara Kohanim Omdim. Let's say you have 10 Kohanim, they're standing somewhere. Upeirosh Echad Mehem, and one of them separates. Ubal, and has relations with someone and has a child. We don't know who the father of the child is, but we know it was one of these 10 Kohanim. So the halach is Havlad Shtuki. The child has the status of a Shtuki. Rashi over here says Havlad Shtuki. The kosher, in other words, the child is kosher. We just don't know who the father is. That's what it means. Shtuki, da Pshita de ben Kohen, Habala Penuyuhu. Because we know for sure that he is the son of a Kohen, and we know that the Kohen had relations with an unmarried woman, so the child again has the status of a shtuki. So the Gemara says, my shtuki, what does it mean exactly shtuki? What practical nafkamina does that make? The Gemara says, if you say that it means that we quiet him in terms of the inheritance, that he doesn't get the property from his father, so the Gemara says, pshita, that would be obvious. We have no idea who the father is. Of course he's not going to be able to get the property of any of these men. So rather, the Gemara says, rather, what does it mean? We quiet him from the status of a Kohen. Rashi over here says, he's not allowed to worship, he's not allowed to do the avod in the Beis HaMikdash, because again, we can't treat him like a Kohen, even though we know he's a Kohen, but since we don't know exactly who his father is, he can't do the avoda. Now, even though in terms of Yuchsin, he's allowed to marry a woman who is fit for the kahuna, but when it comes to doing the avoda, he is disqualified from the kahuna. And so the Gemara says, if that's the case, he's meshaskin osam midin kahuna. My time, and what's the reason for that? Why is it that he can't do avoda? Why don't we consider him to be like a kohen if we know that indeed his father was a kohen? Amar Kra, because the pasuk says, "V'haisalo ulazaro acharav." It says regarding kohanim, it will be for his children after him. But inon zaro miyuchas acharav. There's a halacha that you need to recognize the yichus of his child. You need to know who the father is in order for him to have the status of a kohen to do the avoda. Rashi says, "Acharav shenikor zaro shushalo." It has to be clear that this child is his. Otherwise, he cannot do the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash. Again, ba'inon zaro miyuchas acharav v'leka. You need to have that his child is miyuchas acharav, and here you don't have that. And so the Gemara continues, Maskeflo Rapapa. Rapapa asks the following question. Elamayat, according to that logic that you darsh in the pasuk will Zaro Acharov, Gabe Avram dichse. By Avram also it says a similar pasuk. It says Lios L'chol Elokim ulezaracha acharecha. It says I'll be a God for you and your children after you. So Hasamai Kamazur Le Rachmana. So there, how are you understanding the warning from the pasuk? What does it mean ulezaracha acharecha? As Rashi over here says, My Kamazur Le Rachmana Hoel Vu Acharov Kadorash De Leila Inyan Psul Kahuna. You just darshaned the acharav by kohanim to say there's a disqualification in terms of kahuna. So hachamai psul kadarashtabe. So what's the disqualification over here? Havadai gabe Yisrael kosherhu kagon asar ksherimam demufira shechar mehemubal. Let's say you have the same case of 10 Yisraelim who are standing and they're all kosher and one of them has relations. We don't know who the child is. So what are we going to say over here? What's the disqualification? And so the Gemara says, no, hachi kamar. Here's what that pasuk means. Hachi kamar le is saying to him as follows: Lo tinsev ovedes means to say, L'zaracha acharecha means don't marry a non-Jew, or don't marry, let's say, a shivcha, maidservant, to lezil zaracha basra, because then the children, we don't want the children to follow her, because the halacha is that if a Jewish man marries a non-Jewish woman or a shivcha, the child actually follows their status. That's what it means, lios l'chol elokim u'lezaracha acharecha. Only if the children follow you am I going to be for you for a God. As Rashi over here says, zaracha basra, the children follow her. Like we say in the third parak of Kiddushin, Shivcha Havlad Kamoha. By a Shivcha, the child is like her. Also by an Ovedes Kochavim, same thing. The children follow her. If the mother is a Yisraelis, that's called your son. But if it's your son from an Ovedes Kochavim, from an idol worshiper, that's not called your son, rather that's called her son. So in that case, by Avram Avinu, it's a specific warning in terms of marrying a non-Jew. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the following. Bryce, so Rishon Roy Leos Kohen Gadol, the first child is fit to be a Kohen Gadol. Rashi over here says, Rishon Roy Leos Kohen Gadol, Hecha Shemiyavim Eishasachib Besoch Gimel. Similar to our Mishnah, the case over here is a case of Yibam, where the widow does Yibam with her brother-in-law within 3 months of the death of her first husband. V'yalda Safek ben Tesla Rishon, Safek ben Shival Achron. Now she gives birth to a child. We don't know who the father is. We don't know if it's her first husband or whether it's her second husband. So it says, again, let's say the fathers are Kohanim, so that child is still fit to be a Kohen Gadol. And so the Gemara asks, don't we say, didn't we just say before that we need Zaro Miyuchas Achrav in order to serve and do the Avod in the Beis HaMikdash? We need it to be that the child can identify his father, and here you don't have that. We don't know which one of the husbands is actually this child's father, so how is he fit to be a Kohen Gadol? And so to that the Gemara answers, Zaro Miyuchas Achrav D'Rabbanan. And really this halacha that we require Zaro Miyuchas Achrav is only a halacha midrabbanan. Ukro asmachta b'yam, and the pasuk that we brought is just an asmachta. It's not the real source. V'chigazer rabbanan biznus, and the rabbanan really only made a gezerah by a situation of znus. In other words, let's say you had a woman, let's say her husband, let's say you have a woman who's married, and then you have a situation where her husband dies or she separates from her husband, and then she doesn't marry the second husband. Rather, she has a situation of znus with the second man, and they have a child within 3 months. So then we say you have a problem of zarum yuchas acharav, and we say he can't serve, he can't do avod in the Beis HaMikdash, assuming we're talking about kohanim. But benisuin lo gazer rabbanan. But if you have a situation of marriage, or like in this case over here, a situation of yibam, a legitimate marriage, so there we don't make a gezerah. There's no halacha that we require zarum yuchas acharav in order to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. And the Gemara continues, Uviznus mi gazer rabbanan, but is there even a gezerah when it comes to a situation of znus? Vatnan, but we learned in the Mishnah. Misha lo shasa achar bala shlosha chadashim. The Mishnah said, let's say you have a woman who she didn't wait 3 months after her husband, after her first husband, v'nisis, and then she got married, v'yolda, and then she gave birth to a child. That's exactly our case in the Mishnah. But the question is, what exactly is the situation? My achar bala, what does it mean after her husband? Did her husband die? Did they get divorced? In what way exactly was she separated in our Mishnah from the first husband? Ilem achar misas bala. Now, if you're going to say that the case over here in our Mishnah is that the husband died, so ema seifa, so let's take a look at the seifa, the end of the Mishnah. What did it say? It said, Hu onein aleihem v'heim onein in all of. It says he has the status of onein for them. He doesn't know, let's say one of them dies, he doesn't know which is the father, so if either one dies, he's an onein, and the same the other way around. They're onein for him. Now, if it's saying they are onein for him, so bishlama hu onein aleihem, I understand why he's an onein for them. Mashkachas lo b'nisuin d'sheni v'likor atzamas dekama. You can even come up with a case where, let's say, the first husband had died. How can he be an onein on both of them if the first husband had already died previously? So the answer is you could have as follows. Let's say there was a marriage to the second husband, and then you have a situation where the second husband dies, or let's say there's a moving of the bones of the first husband. The halach of onein doesn't only apply when there's a death, but even if you're going to move the bones from one grave to another, there would be a halach of onein. So it's possible for him to be an onein on both of them, even if the marriage to the second husband was after the death of the first one. Elohim onein in olav, onein im olav. But what about the case where they're an onein on him? If they are onein on him, so it must be hechi mashkachas la. How could it be? How could you have them both being an onein? Kamoha misla. You just said that the first one died already. How can the first one be an onein if he's already dead? Viela begrusha. So rather, what must we be talking about in our Mishnah? Gemara says our Mishnah must mean that there was a divorce. She divorced her first husband, and she didn't wait 3 months, and then she married the second husband. Umay achar bala. And what does the Mishnah mean when it says after her husband? Achar get bala. You're going to say it means that after she got a get from her first husband, then she goes ahead and marries a second husband. Let's assume that's how we interpret the Mishnah. But if that's true, that's also not going to make sense. Ema seifa. Let's look at the end of the Mishnah. It said, Hu ein metame lahem and v'heim einon metamen lo. It said he's not allowed to become tamei to them, and they're not allowed to become tamei to him again, because each one might be his father. So bishlam hein ein metamen lo. I understand that they can't be metame to him. So that's going to be a stringency. Because each one of them, maybe that's not actually his son, and the Kohen is only allowed to be metame to his close relative. But how do we understand the other line that he can't be metame for them? Amai, why can't he be metame? I understand he can't become tame to the second father, the second husband, because again, that might not actually be his father. So the son cannot become tamei to him if, let's say, he should die. But when it comes to the first one, he should be allowed to become tamei to the first husband. Why? And this is what Rashi pointed out before. Because if he's actually the son of the first husband, so then it's fine, he can become tamei to him. Now, if he's the son of the second one, now the second Kohen actually married a divorcee, so that would mean that this child's a cholol. So shaper kametamile, he's allowed to become tamei to that first one that dies, even if he's actually not his son. Why? To cholalu, because he would be a cholol, and if he's a cholol, there's no problem a cholol becoming tamei. So therefore, that line in the Mishnah doesn't make sense. And so the Gemara says, Elalav, rather is it not the only way we can interpret our Mishnah is biznus. We're talking about a situation of znus. She wasn't married to these men. It's not a situation where she married husband number 1, and then she did not wait 3 months, and she married husband number 2. Rather, it's a situation of znus. When it says husband over here, it's not really her husband. It really just means boala. It really just means the man that she had relations with. And yet, nevertheless, what does it say at the end of our Mishnah? Even though we're not talking about a situation of marriages over here, we're talking about a situation of znus, but it says at the end of this Mishnah that this individual who cannot identify which Kohen is his father, Ola b'mishmor shel zeh v'shel zeh, he's allowed to go up and serve in the Beis HaMikdash in the mishmor of this one and in the mishmor of the other one. In other words, even though it's a situation where he cannot identify his father, and it's a situation of znus, apparently he is allowed to serve in the Beis HaMikdash, and we do not make a gezerah, u'tiyuv to the Shmuel, and this would therefore seem to be a refutation of Shmuel, because again, Shmuel said if you have a Kohen who cannot identify who his father is, and it was a situation of znus, that Kohen cannot serve in the Beis HaMikdash, and this seems to be saying just the opposite. And Rashi over here explains, Elalab is znus, rather isn't the only way to understand our Mishnah that it's talking about znus. meaning to say, Sheshneim bo aleh biznus, meaning both of them had relations with her, and it was nus, it was not marriage. She had relations with both of these men within 3 months, and he can't identify his father. V'hilkach ein metame lehen, and therefore he's not allowed to become tamei for that to them. De bein kach ubein kach kohen kosher, because either way he's still considered a kohen kosher. It's not a situation where, let's say, a kohen is with a divorcee where he's considered a cholol, the son's considered a cholol. That's not the case over here. This son is considered to be a kohen kosher. He's not allowed to be metame. And also the halachas of onin apply to him like any other kohen. And so again, if we're talking about a scenario of zenus, so he should not be allowed to do avodah in the Beis Hamikdash according to Shmuel because he cannot identify his father, and it's a scenario of zenus. But the Mishnah says he is allowed to do avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, and that's the question of the Gemara on Shmuel. And we'll just take a look at Rashi before as well. B'shlomahu onin aleim mashkachas lo afilu b'nesuin. Let's say you have a situation where the first husband already died, so how could he be an onin on both of them if the first husband died and then the woman went on to marry the second husband? No, you could find such a case. Now, even though the first one died a long time ago, like we explained when we did the Gemara, if you collect the bones, you move those bones around after many years, onen zeh safek aleim, still this individual has to be an onen, v'asar bekachim and izasar bekachim, detnan b'psachim, because we learned in the Mishnah Psachim, hashomei al meso, if he hears about his mace, v'hamelaket atzamo, so let's say they're collecting the bones, ochel bekachim la'erev aval kol hayom asr, he's allowed to eat kachim in the evening, but that entire day he is considered an onen, and it is forbidden. And the Gemara continues, Amar of Shemaiah says on behalf of Shmuel, how can Shmuel understand our Mishnah? B'mima'enes, we might be talking about a mima'enes. A mima'enes, again, is a ketana, a minor, who refuses her marriage. Rashi over here says, B'mima'enes, li'olam biznus lo misukma. Really, the Mishnah is not talking about znus. Da pasal avoda, because again, in such a situation of znus, this child actually would be pasal avoda if he can't identify his father. It wouldn't be able to say this idea that he serves in the Beis Hamikdash and the shifts of both of the individuals. So then how could it be that you have a situation where this child witnesses the death of both of these men, and he's not allowed to be metame to them, to kohen kosher, because he's considered totally a kohen kosher, because again, we can't have a case of a divorce, because then he might be a cholol, and he would be allowed to be metame to them. So Rashi says, what we're talking about over here is she's a ketana, she's an orphan, and she was married, and she refused the marriage to her first husband, and then after she did the miyun, she did not wait the requisite 3 months, and then she remarried. So in such a situation, she's not really a grusha, both husbands are still alive, and that can be the case of our Mishnah. But the Gemara says, can a mima'enes even give birth? Can a girl who's a minor, is she able to give birth? Because this would presume that she's able to have children. But didn't Rabbevi teach in front of Rav Nachman? There are 3 women that when they have relations, they have to use a moch, they have to use a pad. In other words, they put the moch over there in order to prevent pregnancy. And who are these 3 women? Ketana, Mu'uberes, Umeinika. A ketana, or Mu'uberes, means a woman who's already pregnant, and a meinika means a woman who's nursing. And he explains, Ketana shemet tesaber v'tamus. A ketana, because we're afraid she might become pregnant and then she's going to die. The assumption is that if a ketana becomes pregnant, it's dangerous and she's just going to die. Mu'uberes, and why a mu'uberes? Why is she trying to prevent a pregnancy? Shematasa ubrasandal, because if she becomes pregnant while she's already pregnant, so the fetus that's in her body is going to become a sandal. And again, that means to say that it's going to press against the face. It's going to also create a situation of danger to the existing fetus. And Meinika, why can a nursing woman, why is she preventing pregnancy? Shema tigmol as bena v'yamas, because again, the situation is, maybe she's going to end up weaning her son, she's not going to be able to nurse him properly, and then he's going to die. Ve'ezui ketana, and what's considered a ketana? Mibas achas esrei shana v'yom echad, it means, let's say she's 11 years old in one day, ad bas shtei mesrei shana v'yom echad, until the age of 12 in one day, pachas mikano yeser al kain. Now, if she's less than this or more than this, mishameshes kedarka v'olechas, she can have regular relations, it's not a problem. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir says. The Chachamim Omrim, and the Chachamim say, achazu v'achazu, no, in all situations, doesn't matter what age, mishameshes kedarka v'oleches, she can have relations in the normal fashion. Umin hashamayim yirachmu, and from the heavens they're going to have mercy on her. Shenemar, like it says, Shomer Pesayim Hashem, those who are not aware, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu guards them. So in any case, what do you see over here? It sounds like a minor is not able to get pregnant. And Rashi over here explains, Mi bas yud aleph ul inyan miyun nami, when it comes to me, and also bas yud beis v'yom echad lo mema'enes. Already once she reaches 12 years old in one day, that can't be miyun. She's got to be younger. Umekameachin, earlier than that, katani, what does it say? It says the ima abramei, so that if she becomes pregnant, she's going to die. And pachas mikan, and if she's even younger, eina misaberes klal, apparently she doesn't become pregnant at all. Yoser al zeh imi abra lo meisa, and if she's older than that, again, if she gets pregnant, she's not going to die. So in any case, again, it doesn't seem that we can have a situation of miyun, and the girl would even be able to get pregnant. And so the Gemara continues with another answer of how to understand our mission according to Shmuel. Mashkachasla, you can understand our mission in the following situation, B'kiddushay Tos. We're talking about a situation where the Kiddushin, that first Kiddushin with the first man, was actually a mistaken Kiddushin. Rashi over here says, B'kiddushay Tos, al Tanai v'lo niskayim. In other words, they had a Kiddushin on a condition, and the condition was never fulfilled, so there never was a marriage. The Na'afka Minei below Gita, she actually can leave him without a get. V'nisas b'soch gimel, then she goes ahead and she gets married within 3 months. She's not considered a divorcee in that case, and so there's no way he's a chalal either. So now you have a case where they're both alive, he can see both of them die. The Kohen kosher, he's a completely kosher Kohen. That's why he's not allowed to be metame. Viola b'mishmaru lavod, he's also allowed to serve in the Beis HaMikdash, because again, this is not really znus. The v'znus ki agavna dehavi al yidei nesuin lo gazer abonin. When it's znus, but really there was a marriage over here, it was just a mistake. It was just like a kiddushay tos, where the Tanai was not fulfilled, so there would not be a gezer midrabanan, and again, there'd be no problem with such an individual serving in the Beis HaMikdash. Uchad Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, it's just like Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Mishum Rabbi Yishmael, because Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, V'hilo Nispasa Asura. It says if you have a situation where she wasn't coerced, so then she is forbidden. Hanisbasa Mutaris, in other words, let's say the woman is coerced, so then she's still mutter to her husband. You have a situation of a woman that's married and then she's raped by another man, so she's still going to be mutter because she was coerced. It's not considered her fault. And there's another example of a person that even though she was not coerced, mutaris, she's still mutaris to her husband. And what is this case? Kiddushay tos. That's exactly our case. When you have a kiddushay tos, so the whole thing was a mistake, so then we say that she's still mutaris. Even if she has a child on her shoulders, she can refuse that first marriage. It's like she was never married. And she can go ahead and she can marry somebody else. And Rashi over here explains, he miyutahu, the word he in the pasuk is an exclusion. V'hachi kamer, here's how you understand the pasuk. He kolomar isha gemura, when you have a full-fledged wife, techi lo nensav is in asura. So if she was not coerced and she has nus, so then she becomes asur. The fact that she committed adultery makes her asur to her husband. V'yesh loch acheres, there's another example, that even though she had relations with her husband and it was willingly mutaris labala, she's still mutter to her husband. Ve'ezuzu, and what case would that be? V'holechesla would be a situation again where the marriage wasn't really a marriage at all because it was a kiddushay tos. V'keven de lo boy minei get, since she doesn't require a get, lav ishto havi, she really never was considered his wife. V'izin, so let's say she would have znus in such a situation. Harei kepnuya shezinsu mutarislo, she would just be like an unmarried woman who had znus and she would be totally mutter. And again, that could be our case over here as well. She can go ahead and marry the second husband even without a get, so you have no issue of cholol over here. This could be a case again of a Kohen that's completely kosher, and both of the fathers, both of his potential fathers, are still alive. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph.